I was told women can't do the job. I was just flat out told that we would never consider a woman. And sometimes they would let me ride with them with my coveralls and my boots and do a few things, but they would look at me like I was from Mars.
Hi, and welcome to Don't Shrink to Fit podcast. This podcast is all about you and all the courageous, driven women like you. We are here to inspire, to empower, to share, and to embrace one another. We will be talking with women from different backgrounds and careers about love, family, friendship, their wins and falls, and what it took for them to live the life they love. I am your host, Claudia Noriega-Bernstein, and I am so happy you're here today. Hi, everyone. Today, I have a guest that is a true pioneer. In the late 1970s, when many bar doors and boardrooms, by the way, were firmly closed to women, Linda Rhodes walked straight through them. Fresh out of veterinary school, she stepped into Utah's Wasatch, I think that's how you pronounce it, Valley, as one of the first females large animal veterinarians in a world that openly believed women did not belong in the barnyard. But her story is not just about breaking the glass ceiling. It's about the emotional cost of ambition, the tension between career and marriage, navigating grief, and asking the question so many women still ask today: can we truly have it all? So I want to welcome you, Linda. I am so happy and excited to be here, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Claudia, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that lovely introduction.
Very, very happy to have you. So let's start from the beginning. How all this adventure started?
Well, it's kind of an odd story. Most people that go to veterinary school have worked for a veterinarian, or they have ridden horses when they were children, or they have grown up on a farm. I grew up in a suburb with just a couple cats, and I didn't ever think about being a veterinarian. I went to undergraduate college in a liberal arts college, and I studied mathematics and physics and chemistry, and really had nothing to do with animals or biology. But in 1970, when I graduated, a long time ago, it was the time when there was a real movement of people, we call it back to the land movement, when hippies were living in communes and going out to make vegetable gardens and milk goats and shear sheep and chop wood and kind of get back to living a simpler life. Mm-hmm. And my sister was living on one of these communes in California, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do next after college. She said, well, why don't you come out here and milk some goats? So I went to California, and I milked goats for room and board. They didn't pay me anything, but I learned all these great country skills. I learned how to shear sheep, and I learned about raising chickens, and I learned about how to I never put a saddle on a horse. I learned to put a saddle on a horse, and I really enjoyed being in the barn. I enjoyed the animals, and I enjoyed the physicality of using my body, and you have to use your mind too, because these animals are complicated and they need complicated care. Right. And whenever the veterinarian would come, I would follow him around and watch what he did, and then I would go and read the Merck veterinary manual to find out exactly what he'd done and learn the terminology. And after a couple of years, I just thought, well, now I have to grow up and figure out what I want to do for a living. Why don't I be a veterinarian? I can be in the barn. I don't have to sit behind a desk. I can still have that connection with animals that I was really enjoying, but it also will use the science part of my brain, the part of my brain that enjoys scientific thought and reading science articles. So nobody told me it was hard to get into vet school. And it truly was hard, but I just embarked on it. And I came back east, and I had to take some bio courses before I applied, and I applied, and I was lucky enough to get in. So that was the start of the whole thing.
Wow. But how incredible that you never had that passion for animals, and just one trip changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had anything to do with goats, but goats are highly entertaining animals. They are very smart. They can get themselves out of any enclosure you put them in. They can open locks, and they can jump over high gates, and they like to run around and be crazy. And the little kids are just really cute. And I really like the idea of getting milk from an animal and being able to make butter and cheese and being able to use that product. And you have a relationship with this animal. You're going to milk them twice a day. They get to know you. You get to know them. They're really fun animals, and I just got a kick out of it. I would go out with my cup of coffee in the morning and just watch them in the barnyard, and they have all these social interactions. It's really fun, and it's a nice life. You get to be outside, you get to use your muscles. You're not behind a desk all day. I didn't know at the time how incredibly challenging it was going to be.
Right. But it also, before we go to the second part of your life, which is fascinating, is also learning how to trust the animal and make sure the animal trusts you. Because I have never milked any animals, but I see in movies how sometimes somebody tries and the cow or they push them away. It's like, I don't trust you. You don't get to touch me. So you
Yeah.
have to really create a trusting relationship, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's very smart of you to mention that. Yeah, most of these animals, I mean, they're not as big as cows, the goats, but sure for cows, they weigh 1,500 pounds. And if they don't want you to do something to them, you're not going to do it unless you anesthetize them. And they have to develop a trust that you're there to help them. And they do. They get to know you just like you get to know them. And a lot of all the animals had names. They each goat had her own name, and they each had their personalities. So just like with horses, you get to kind of have an intuition about what they like and what they don't like, and what's going to scare them and what's going to calm them down. And so that kind of intuitive interaction was also very fulfilling, because it's a nonverbal communication that
Right.
I think it helps you in your personal relationships. You tend to be more observant. You tend to be more intuitive with the people around you once you have developed that skill with animals. So
Right.
it's a great life skill to have.
Yeah, and it's also an energy exchange, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
So you went to school and then where were you at that time?
I went to University of Pennsylvania vet school
Right.
in Philadelphia. They have
Mhm.
a campus right in the city, and then they have a large animal hospital that's about an hour west of the city. So I was in Philadelphia for 4 years and living in the city. And then in the summers, I would go back to upstate New York, where my husband lived and my sister lived
Right.
at the time. And one summer, I milked cows in a commercial dairy. The next summer, I rode around with the veterinarians at the Cornell Vet School. So whatever chance I got, I tried to get as much experience as I could with cows.
So how did you get to Utah?
Oh man, that's such a story. I talk about this in my book that
And I want to talk about your book towards the end of the interview because I want everybody to get it. I think it's fascinating what you share in your book.
so
I'm all ears.
the story was that when I was generally vet students in maybe March of their senior year start looking for jobs. And by the time you graduate in May, most people have jobs. So I started in March, and my husband was living in Ithaca, New York, and I'm right in the middle of a lot of dairy practices. And our plan was that he was playing music there with his brothers, and I was going to come back and get a job, get my job, and I would do my thing, taking care of cows, and he would play music, and we would live happily ever after. But I had 12 job interviews in that area, and gradually farther and farther away. And I was told women can't do the job. I was just flat out told that we would never consider a woman. And sometimes they would let me ride with them with my coveralls and my boots and do a few things, but they would look at me like I was from Mars. And they would tell me I would never hire a woman. One guy told me my wife would be uncomfortable with me working with a woman, so I'm not going to hire a woman.
Wow, that is so interesting because it wasn't even about your capability to do the job, but also what it would mean to
Yes.
have a woman working for him.
Yes, yeah. And so I got pretty desperate, and my parents had moved out to California a couple of years prior. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to California, and it's going to be more liberal. The guys out there will give me a job, right? So I went and took the California boards, couldn't get a job in California. They wouldn't even interview me. They would hear my voice on the phone and they would say, don't come in. We're not interested in talking to you.
No way.
This was a long time ago when you could be
Right.
more open about your prejudice. But so I was running out of money, and I had really lots of student loans to pay off. So I took a job in a small animal practice in Pasadena, California, which is not at all what I wanted to be doing. But I needed the money. And out of the blue, I got a call from a friend of mine who was in Utah, and she said Utah State University has an internship that is basically taking care of cows. That they have beef cows, they have dairy cows, they have goats. They also have goats and sheep. And it's a 1-year internship, and it's for a new graduate, and you should apply for it. And I said, wait a minute, it's September. All the new graduates have jobs. Why didn't they hire somebody to start in May? And she said they did. They hired this big blonde Mormon guy from Colorado State, and he took the job. And after a month and a half on the job, he got kicked by a cow, broke both his legs, and he's now out for the count. And so the job is open. And
Wow.
so I called them and they said, well, we're going to re-advertise it and we're not sure. And I got in my car and I drove 1,000 miles to Logan, Utah to interview. It just showed up and I told them I want this job. And they were like, well, we're going to have to ask around and we're going to have to re-advertise it. I said, look, it's a job for a new graduate. All the new graduates already have jobs. I'm the
Right.
only game in town, guys. You have to hire me. And they were still waffling. I went back to California, drove 1,000 miles back to California, waited a couple of weeks, called them up, and the guy who was this hiring, he said to me, well, my wife is really upset with me because I'm doing all the emergencies that the intern usually does, and I have to get up in the middle of the night, and it's doubling my workload, and I still have to teach, and I don't know, we're really desperate, and I guess we're just going to have to give you a chance. And that was my first job because they were so desperate. That's how
Oh,
I started.
and how long you were there? By the way, good for you for being so persistent.
I was determined to do
Yeah.
to get a cow job. I really was. But yeah, so the internship ran until the following May. And
Mhm.
then there was a local large animal practice. So it was just one guy, and his practice was growing like crazy. And he heard that I was finishing my internship and that by that time, I had a reputation of kind of knowing that I could do the job.
Right.
And he came in and said he wanted to give me a chance and would I like to stay in Utah and work in his practice. So that was the beginning of me being in private practice there. And then our practice was in the northeastern corner of Utah. It went all the way up into Idaho. Some of the best dairies in southeastern Idaho were there, and they were our clients. So I had to break into the world of all these Mormon dairymen. Now I had to have a lady vet show up at their farm, and they had to deal with it. And that was also pretty challenging.
That was a whole different animal, actually. That was a whole different animal. But I'm curious to know in your personal life, I mean, you were married, so you were having like a long distance relationship with your husband.
He came out to Utah. So he wanted to stay in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
He had a musical family, and his brothers and he played music in a band, and his family was an hour and a half north of where he lived, and he was just very connected to that place. And my sister lived there as well. But he did come out to Utah very reluctantly. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we tried to make it work, but it was very difficult with me working. I felt like I had to prove that a woman could do the job. And if I failed, that it would be like everybody would say, well, you see, women can't do it. So I felt
Right.
all that extra pressure. And so I worked really hard. I was out early in the morning. I came in late at night. I was doing emergencies in the middle of the night. I was on call every other weekend and every other night. And the relationship just suffered because I was never there. And he didn't really want to be in Utah. He wanted to be back in New York. And he resented the fact that I was working so hard. And I just couldn't figure out how to balance it. It was just didn't work for us. And it's kind of a spoiler alert, but at the end of the book, he goes back east, and I continue on with my cow work. And
Right.
yeah, it's kind of a story of how sometimes you have to make those choices because it's hard to do it all.
Right. But at the end of the day, also, you were paving this road for other women to have that opportunity, correct?
That was a big part of what I was doing. Exactly. I really felt like if I couldn't do it, that it would be very hard for another woman to come into the state and try to find a large animal job. And that if I was successful, that it would be likely that then the next time a woman came to Utah and said, I want a job, that she would be considered. So yeah, I did feel the responsibility of being a pioneer.
Did you hire other women?
I had technicians who worked with me, women technicians. So the Utah State had an animal science department, and I hired young women who were in the
Mm-hmm.
animal science department. And these were often young women who had lots of experience on dairies or with beef cattle. They'd grown up on farms. They were studying animal nutrition or animal behavior. And so some of them had more experience with cows than I did. So we were a team. And I always went in my truck with a technician. Well, not always. Some emergencies, they just weren't available. But I tried to always have a woman technician with me. And I only found out about this recently. I had to go back and try to track down some of my dairymen to ask their permission to use their pictures in my book. And one of my favorite dairymen had unfortunately passed away, but I got to talk to his son, and took over the dairy. And
Mm-hmm.
his son is named Blair. And Blair said to me, "Oh, Dr. Rhodes, I had such a crush on your technician. So I was in 8th grade when you came to the farm, and I would skip school every time you came to the farm, and I would just like hang around on the fence and watch you and her. He said I had a crush on both of you. And
That's so
I said,
sweet.
how old were you? And he was in 8th grade, and he still remembers that. We got a lot of attention, two women in coveralls and rubber boots going out to do the cow work.
I don't think men really understand all the walls that we have to put down to achieve our dreams. Because here you are, smart, determined, you had a vision for yourself, but not only you had to fight the fact that you were a woman, which was at that time a no-no, but also you were beautiful. So it was like, you're beautiful, that's not a good thing. You're smart, that's not a good thing. You're a woman, that's not a good thing. Strike three, you're out.
That's exactly right. Well, and also the Mormon culture, the women were they were in the kitchen, they were sewing the clothes, they were taking care of the children, they were some of the farms. Once in a while, I would see a woman milking the cows
Right.
in the milking parlor.
Hi, friends. I have a small favor to ask, and I'm so sorry for the interruption, but this is really, really important to me. As many of you know, Brighter Days was truly a labor of love. I wrote it for every woman who has ever questioned her worth, felt stuck, lost her direction, or needed a reminder of the strength that already lived within her. I am incredibly honored to share that I am a finalist for Author of the Year 2026. If my book, my podcast, my coaching, or anything I have shared has touched your life in any way, I would be so grateful if you vote for me. The voting link is in the description of this show. Every vote matters, and every vote helps me continue spreading this message of hope, healing, and empowerment to more women around the world. Thank you so much for being part of this journey and for believing in me. Your support means more than you know. Now, let's continue helping women remember that they never have to shrink to fit again. Thank you so much, and let's go back to the show.
But all the dirty work was done by guys, and they did expect their wives to be pretty and to be clean and to do all the laundry and cook all the food and then not be in the barn. So it was hard for them to envision what was I doing there. And they really did think I was kind of a strange phenomenon.
Right. Like, why does she want to do this when she could be just at home cooking and taking care of the kids?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the patriarchy mentality.
Yeah. And I just had to prove myself over and over again. Can she do this? Can she do that? Can she, and there's a lot of stories about them not trusting my medical judgment and saying, well, maybe we should have, they like my boss. So they'd say, maybe we should have Ron come out and give a second opinion.
Right.
And I would say, you know what? It's 200 miles back to Ron's farm, and it's going to take him half a day to get here and half a day to get home. Let's just call him and you can talk to him. And they would call, there were no cell phones. So they'd have to go into the house and call my boss. And I would describe what was going on. And Ron would say, she knows what she's doing. You got to just listen to her. I would do the same thing. And then they'd get that little reassurance from the guy. And then they let me do what I needed to do.
Even though the world has evolved so much and we have patriarchy in so many places in the world, do you find that those ideas still very strong right now in your field?
Much less so. The veterinary profession has feminized. So it used to be back in the 60s, there were almost no women in veterinary medicine. The vet schools would only admit maybe 2 to 3 women per year in a class of 85 to 100. So there really were no women vets. And then in 1973, when the government passed Title IX, which said the schools can't discriminate. And if they discriminate, they won't get federal dollars. Then the vet schools had to start admitting women. But that only changed in 1973. So I was in class of 74. So I was the benefit of that. But for many, many years, there were many, many more men veterinarians than women. Now it's completely flipped. There are more women veterinarians than men. The vet schools are graduating 80 to 90% women. There's a lot more women doing large animal work. But if you talk to women who are in practice now in the Midwest, for example, they'll tell you there's still prejudice. It's just that the guys can't say it out loud like they did to me. To me, they could say, "We're not hiring a woman." They don't say that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They may not hire a woman, but they can't like say that. It's just not part of the culture now. But I think it's gotten significantly better.
And working with animals, which sometimes are nicer than humans, if I may say that, what do you think has been your biggest lessons working with animals as far as, leadership and gender barriers? What have you learned from the animals?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what we were talking about earlier is that you have to pay attention. You have to be extremely observant. They can't talk to you. They can't
Mm-hmm.
tell you that they have a headache or that their stomach hurts. Or the only way a veterinarian can figure that out is by very close observation. So you get to be an observer. You get
Mm-hmm.
to be somebody who really, you walk up to the cow. You don't, first thing is you don't pull out your stethoscope and put it on. I was taught you just walk around the cow. You just look at her. You look at how her coat is. You look at, what her expression is. You look at how she's holding her, her head. You look at how she's holding her body. You have to develop a kind of a sixth sense. And it takes a long time to do that because you have to look at many, many, many normal animals before you can really pick out what's abnormal. But I think really the biggest thing they taught me is to be observant and to be and you'll notice a lot of important things that have an impact about their health if you take the time and have the patience to be observant.
Because you become their advocate too.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the difficult things about practice is that there are economics to it. So if a cow is really sick and maybe she needs a major operation, maybe she has a twisted stomach or something even worse, the dairyman will calculate it. Can he afford it? And it's not an emotional thing. It's a financial, economic thing because he makes his living the animal's productivity. So if it was going to cost $1,000 for the surgery and the cow was only going to be giving $200 worth of milk, he would
Mm-hmm.
probably send her to slaughter rather than do the surgery.
Oh.
So it's also there's a lot of burden on the veterinarian to diagnose things early and to do really cost-effective treatment so the farmer can afford to keep his animals in his herd. And that's also a big part of what you have to do is you have to balance the cost and the timing with the livelihood of the dairy farmer.
Mm-hmm. And your career always was a priority for you, right?
Yeah, during that time, I mean, I got older and I got better at work-life balance as I got to be an older lady. But back then, in my late 20s, early 30s, I really was out to prove to the world that women could do this, and it was priority number one.
I'm asking you this because when I was reading a little bit about you, I read that you lost one of your parents. And it was very hard for you because you were in a moment where your career was so important that you have to deal with your grief and your career and everything that came with it. So, actually, my question to you is how did you manage that and what did you learn from the animals that you were working with? How to deal with that grief?
Yeah, that was hard. My mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer when I was a freshman in vet school, and she had chemo. And this was back when treatments were really pretty harsh. But she lived for 6 years after her diagnosis. She died when she was 58, so she was tragically young. And I tried to be there for her as much as I could, but vet school was demanding and she was feeling pretty much okay during vet school. So I didn't spend as much time with her. But as she got sicker, moved to California, I tried to spend more time with her. And of course, when she was dying, I had to leave my job and go. And my sister and I both went and spent her last several weeks with her. And very hard, as you can imagine. I was lucky enough that I could take my vacation time and a little bit of extra time, family time, to do it. My boss was not happy because he had to take over the entire practice, but he understood. But when I came back, it was a lot of pressure and I just had to jump right back into work and I wasn't ready. I was still really grieving. But I think if you say, what do the animals teach you? I think more so from pets than farm animals, but our pets don't live as long as we do. Dogs will live 10 to 15 years. Cats will live maybe 15 to 20 years. But most of us that love animals and have pets are going to
Mhm.
experience a pet's death. And that, I think that's a little rehearsal for how to deal with grief, for how to deal with the grief that we all are going to have to experience at one time or another with it when our friends and family die. And I think we don't have enough, death is not part of our culture. We tend to not see or experience death. In the old days, people died in their homes and it was part of life. And now we kind of push it away. But our pets are there to teach us, I think, how to overcome, understand, experience, and recover from grief. And so I don't think so much the farm animals, but certainly the experience that I've had with having pets my whole life. I understood that there was going to be a healing. I couldn't feel it at the time because I was so sad about losing my mom, but I kind of knew that there was going to be a time when I was going to heal. And that gave me a lot of hope. It was dark days when I came back to working full time right after my mom died, though. I just had to jump right back in. It was winter.
I can only imagine how hard it was for you to try to navigate all your emotions when you had the pressure of having to do what you needed to do every day. I lost my dad. He was in Peru and I was pregnant, so I didn't really find out until I called him to tell him that I had a baby. Those were two very big feelings at the same time, having a newborn and grieving. And it also took me a minute to really embrace that grief and realize that I had to go through it to be
Yeah.
able to not ever be totally okay, but just accept the fact that I will not be with him anymore.
Yeah, it's a process, and everybody experiences it differently. But it was kind of one of several crises that happened right around the same time that just kind of blew everything up. And things fell apart, and I quit my job, and my husband went back east. And it was I kind of try to show my readers that it's okay to not have it all. There are some times in life when things just fall apart, and you just have to accept the fact that you can't. There's always going to be difficulties, and sometimes they come in piles, and as they did for me.
And also, I think for me, is accepting the fact that if I am going through this because I am capable to go through this,
Yeah,
I don't receive anything that we cannot handle.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it makes you more resilient when you come out the other
100%.
side. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about your book. What inspired you to write that book?
Well, fast forward in my life many years, I got remarried and I had a son, and I had him when I was 42. So I was an old mother. And after my mother died, I felt so badly that I didn't know more about her life. I was so busy with my life. I hadn't asked her. I just sat down and had those long conversations about how you were growing up and why you moved here and how you met my dad and, how you felt about having a baby. And I hadn't had those conversations. And then she was gone. So I thought, well, I'm an old mother. By the time my son gets to be 30 or 35 or 40 and is curious about me, I was already moved on to a different part of my career. I was no longer in the barn. I was in the pharmaceutical industry. And I thought, he's never going to know these stories about his mom being a vet in Utah. I've just got to write it down. So the motivation initially was to have a record of that part of my life so that at some point when he became interested, it would be there for him. That was why I started the book.
That's beautiful, and I totally understand that. And what do you think people will get out of your book, aside of the wonderful stories that you're sharing?
I've actually had such great feedback already on the book. And I think what people seem to be picking up on and what I intended was encouragement to continue to persevere in something that you believe in and you love, even in the face of lots of discouragement. So how to have that grit, how to get up in the morning and just do it again and try it again. And I think more importantly, kind of with a smile on your face, being angry, not being resentful, not being discouraged, but just quietly doing the work, getting up every day, facing the challenges. That's applicable to everybody in every kind of situation. There are challenges of just being a mother. There are challenges if you're in the trades, if you're a carpenter. There's challenges if you're a big executive in a big company. That it all boils down to there's a lot of things in life that you could resent or get angry about or be bitter about. But if you just keep at it and you keep a smile on your face and you show up and you do the work, eventually things go your way. And I just think that I hope people take that from the book.
I'm sure they will. I have one last question for you. If you could go back in time to the time where you were this young girl out of school, knocking doors, everybody saying no to you, what would you tell that younger version of yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess just reassurance, just to say it feels impossible. It feels bleak. It feels discouraging. don't give up. Just keep going. If it's something you really care about and you really love, you can have a lot of doors slammed in your face, but you just keep at it. And, you may have to zigzag. Like I had to go and take a job in the small animal clinic because of finance, but just never give up. Just keep trying, because if it's something that you really want and you really love, it's worth it.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You're really an inspiration. At the edge of the pool and they're not ready to jump and they're waiting for a sign. There is no sign. Just do it. Just do it, because you never know what rewards are waiting for you.
That's
So I
it.
feel very privileged to have you here, listen to your story. And I want to remind also my listeners that I do have a podcast and I have a newsletter that tied with the podcast. I send it every week, and I'm going to share more things about you in my newsletter, a little bit about the episode, all the links to get your books. I feature a book every time I send my newsletter. So I'm going to share all the information of your books. And the more we read about inspiring people like you, the more empowered we feel to pursue a dream, no matter how impossible it might seem at the moment. So thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate you having you here.
Claudia, thank you so much. This was a fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate your efforts. It's wonderful.
Thank you all for listening to the Don't Shrink to Fit podcast. If you like this episode, please write a juicy comment below and subscribe to my podcast. Remember, we can only fly if we embrace each other. Until next week, be happy, be safe, and be kind to yourself.